Before we begin, I wanted to say that I am personally acquainted with some of the people that worked on this game. However, this video is not sponsored, I was not provided with an advanced or review copy, and all opinions are still completely my own. Now let's get started. It's been 4 short years since Final Fantasy VII Remake was released. While I loved Remake, I was very vocal that I thought having the entire first game be set in Midgar was a mistake. I remembered the scope of the original PlayStation 1 game, and I thought, there's no way they can make up for lost time in the sequels, not with modern-day graphics and gameplay. I'll say it right now though, I was wrong. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is massive, covering an enormous swath of the classic title's runtime. But breadth is only part of the puzzle. How does Rebirth compare to Remake? And is it strong enough on its own to be worthwhile for anyone skipping out on Remake? Let's find out. As usual, my reviews are spoiler-free for the subject game. However, since Rebirth is a sequel, this video will obviously contain spoilers for Final Fantasy VII Remake and Crisis Core Reunion. If you'd like to avoid those spoilers, this is your chance to click away. In the meantime, please subscribe and click the bell to stay updated on my content. I've already made tons of videos, including more Final Fantasy VII stuff, my Square Enix playlist, and more. Okay, spoiler warning's over. If you're still here, then you know what lies ahead. This review is based on a digital retail release for the PlayStation 5. Rebirth begins immediately after the events of Remake and Intergrade. Cloud and the gang head to Calm to discuss Cloud's past history with Sephiroth, but things may not be as they appear. With the disappearance of the Whispers, strange continuity issues emerge, leaving the party conflicted. Already on the run from Shinra, the remnants of Avalanche set out to find Sephiroth and get the answers they need. I will say, I love the journey of Rebirth far more than the one in Remake, as Rebirth sticks much closer to the original game's events. For the most part, the changes that exist are either harmless or better than the original. There were a lot of things that were totally optional in the original game that are made mandatory here, to the story's significant benefit. As far as being the entry point to the narrative, I think most of the story is intelligible without playing the first game. Rebirth takes us through many of the plot threads that contain party member backstories, and there are lines about, scenes of, and references to the major events of Remake, so you won't miss out on too much if you start here. What actually might confuse new players is the stuff in Rebirth that has to do with the ending of Remake. Without giving specific spoilers, Rebirth doesn't spend a ton of time exploring the fallout from Remake's ending. When it does, there's not a lot of exposition as to the why is this happening aspect of it all. It simply continues that narrative chronology. Not a big gripe since Rebirth doesn't dedicate too much attention to that storyline during its 70-ish hour duration, but it's something to be aware of anyway. Another note, Rebirth often chooses explicit sentiment over how the PS1 classic implies context, and I personally prefer the subtle approach of the original. Again, I don't want to say much more or give any examples because I think these are best experienced firsthand. But there are a lot of times where Rebirth says stuff outright when the original 7 allowed players to read between the lines. I think the gentle nudge of the PS1 game made the story more compelling. However, this is just my personal opinion as a player well versed in the original game, and I don't think this necessarily makes Rebirth worse. And honestly, I don't even think these changes will have an effect on players that never played the original game. But what can I say? As a classic Final Fantasy VII player, I was completely taken with the story of Rebirth. I regularly found myself grinning nostalgically as I followed the mostly familiar narrative from my childhood. It's the tale I remembered, the beats I played, and the journey I loved, all over again, with a few twists and turns to keep me engaged and invested. On a performance level, Rebirth takes a lot of cues from Final Fantasy XVI's design, but Rebirth does it better. Graphics mode is a near lock-solid 30 FPS at 2160p. The frame rate will drop maybe 2 or 3 frames in rare cases, and the resolution stays at true 4K around 90, maybe even 95% of the time. This is a huge improvement from Final Fantasy XVI's 1080p through 1440p range for its respective quality setting. Rebirth's performance mode equally impressed me. 16 and Rebirth each choose to optimize different aspects of gameplay, with 16 having a consistent 60 FPS for combat, and Rebirth's exploration sitting at a solid 60 FPS. The difference lies in Rebirth's internal resolution for frame rate mode, which actually sits above 1080p as a mean average, and around 1080p for more demanding circumstances. In contrast, performance mode in 16 dips down into the 720p range during intense moments. Also, the frame rate drops are markedly different. Where Rebirth's performance mode can drop around 10 frames at its absolute worst, 16 can fall from 60 FPS into the mid to low 30s. Rebirth's shadows, lighting, and draw distance are the same across both rendering modes, and it all looks good. So really, it's just about how you want to experience the game. Here's a side-by-side of each mode. Here's a split screen. And here's a screen wipe, starting with Performance mode. Now, Graphics mode. And for fun, here's the original game versus Rebirth. Man, look how far we've come. I'm just gonna run some of the greatest hits, a bunch of moments from the old and new game where I was like, yo, I remember that! Like I did with 16, I chose Rebirth's graphics mode for its more consistent gameplay experience, but honestly, performance mode for Rebirth isn't bad. Now if only they would stop adding in mandatory motion blur. Please always include an option to turn off motion blur, thank you. As someone who enjoyed the music in Remake, I can say this with no hesitation. The music in Rebirth is way better. Every track I loved is here, remade with beautiful attention to detail, and I can't get enough of it. Also, nothing in Rebirth sounds like a song from Aladdin. I'm looking at you, Wall Market theme from Remake. The voice acting is great, again in both English and Japanese. I'll always miss George Newbern as Sephiroth, but the cast does an incredible job from beginning to end.
I joined up so I could be a hero, like you.
Well, our mission is to survey a rundown reactor. Another one of those Turks gigs.
あんたみたいな英雄になりたいのにさ。
この任務は老朽化したマコーロの調査。残念ながらタークス案件に近い。
I think Aerith in particular is the best. She just brings a brightness to everything and everyone around her.
Oh, you made it. All in one piece? Sorry we're late.
For the love of... Where the hell have you two been?
On a date. Kind of. What?
I once again opted to play in English, and I have no regrets. Gameplay in Rebirth builds upon the foundation set in Remake and Intergrade. Battles are still real-time action, with the player able to enter a bullet time-enabled menu to perform weapon abilities and materia magic. Clicking the D-pad switches between current party members, and the player can have up to 3 different party arrangements for selection in between combat. You can pressure an enemy by doing certain actions during combat, which helps you build its stagger meter. Staggered enemies take increased damage, and when a character both deals and takes enough damage, they can perform a limit break ultimate attack. Synergy skills have been expanded from Remake and Intergrade. By holding the block button and then pressing any face button, the player can use one of the team-up attacks available with the current party arrangement. Then by using certain individual character abilities, the synergy meter is built up. Upon being filled, combination synergy abilities can be performed. Synergy abilities can be treated like limit breaks in that they are powerful attacks and moves that can turn the tide of battle, but tend to be less frequently encountered. These new mechanics are simple, but they flow effortlessly into the existing structure of battle. Encounters are more frenetic, so combat is more flexible, yet there's no sacrifice in fluency, culminating in a supremely satisfying battle system. Outside of combat, exploration is significantly more important in Rebirth. I knew I was in for a massive adventure when the City of Calm was an actual fully realized city. But the full scope of the game didn't sink in until a few hours later. There are tons of activities this time around. No, like literally there are tons of activities. I don't think you understand, there are so many activities. Love it or hate it, the map is chock full of Ubisoft-style icons and actions, complete with towers to climb. Chocobo catching has been changed from a combat scenario into a series of puzzles. On top of that, there's crafting and material collecting, which you can even do on Chocoback. And there are a few side quests that require specific items from your Chocobo and then crafting unique one-time use items. Everywhere you turn, there are near endless minigames, often with their own story elements. Of course, the Gold Saucer has activities. It's an amusement park with an arcade. But the dolphin scene has been turned into a wave race style minigame. The Fort Condor minigame has been expanded upon, including a small contained storyline. Chadley's Combat Simulator is back, allowing you to fight and obtain more summons, and those play into an entire Proto-Relic side quest that spans the length of the game. And there's an in-game card game called Queen's Blood that sorta works like the Lost Media Final Fantasy Evilus Alliance game Crystal Defenders Vanguard Storm. And there are dozens of Queen's Blood players to face and different card packs to buy, and Queen's Blood also has its own unique storyline within the main story. They even expanded on playing the piano in Tifa's room. Now it's an entire thread of side quests with a bunch of different sheet musics that you can play. If I could go on a little nerdy tangent here, I really enjoyed jumping back into Final Fantasy VII and playing the 007 theme on the piano just like I did back in the day. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. This is a massive, expansive, extremely daunting game to tackle. And I love it. I could not possibly explain every single element that exists in this game, not within a reasonable amount of time. At the end, it boils down to this. Rebirth is not just a great game. It's the Final Fantasy that I pictured in my mind when I was a child. Playing through Rebirth as an adult often carried the same emotional weight as playing through the original Final Fantasy VII when I was a kid, each stone overturned to reveal new and interesting mysteries that await resolution. In a way, playing this game was my own personal reunion with my awestruck youth, and I am equally excited and nervous for the next and final chapter of this story. This one's gonna be a hard act to follow. No use beating around the bush for this one. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth on PlayStation 5 earns a 10 out of 10. Please subscribe, click the bell, and check out the videos on screen. 見てくれてありがとうございます。皆さん、ごきげんよう。さようなら。